Hi everyone, it's great to see so many people joining us today. My name's Penny Oliver. I'm the Head of Environmental Land Management Schemes for the Forestry Division. So I've just got a few slides to say what we're going to be covering and just a bit of general kind of messaging around Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier. So we're going to be covering some of those general messages, some of which are from a DEFRA presentation that some of you might have been on for a few weeks ago. Then we're going to talk about pre-application for CS Higher Tier. So Brown's going to talk about that. And then Richard Hoffman's going to talk about our woodland improvement actions and the species actions in woodland. And then Jim O'Neill's going to talk about agroforestry. And then it'll come back to me for a couple of slides, and then we're going to open up to the Q&A. So as Becca's just said, please put your questions in the Q&A. And please, can you try and focus on what we're going to talk about today? So the pre-application process and the content of CS Higher Tier. And because if other questions about individual cases or kind of wider kind of issues to do with different schemes, we might not be the right people to answer those. But also, if you can read the questions that are going in and uptick those, because we're anticipating quite a lot of you might have the same questions. So it'd be really good if you could uptick the ones you see that you agree with as well. So that'd be really, really useful. So and at the end, when we get to the Q&A, we've got other colleagues from my team and also policy colleagues that can help answer your questions as well. So there's plenty of other Forestry Commission folk on the call that can help with the Q&A when we get there, not just us who are presenting today. So next one, thanks, Becca. So Countryside Stewardship. Probably quite a lot of you already know a bit about Countryside Stewardship, but just a bit of a reminder, it's one of 3 environmental land management schemes that DEFRA run. So it works alongside Sustainable Farming Incentive and Landscape Recovery. So SFI, there was a pilot scheme that started in 2021. And there's been improvements and additions to the scheme ever since. Last July, there was a big increase in the number of actions funded through SFI, including 2 agroforestry actions that I think Jim will touch on later on today in the presentation. There isn't any woodland management actions in SFI yet, but we hope they'll come in the future iteration of the scheme. Landscape recovery is kind of by its kind of name implies very much landscape wide projects with multiple landowners. That's been through 2 rounds so far. So we've had round 1, which had 22 projects in it, and round 2 had 34 projects in it. There is quite a lot of woodland interest in those projects, both woodland creation and woodland management. So CS Higher Tier. So it pays very much as it has done in the past, but pays farmers, foresters and other land managers to deliver environmental objectives and targets very much related to the environmental improvement plan, and also mitigate the effects of climate change, so relating to net zero policies. So it pays for land management actions. So those are revenue actions, annual payments for revenue actions, but also capital items as well. So they're one-off capital items as well as the revenue actions. So it's there to create, restore and manage habitats, manage species and protect against flooding. So the previous scheme, which some of you will probably be very familiar with, has been expanded and improved in this current iteration. So the schemes are all part of DEFRA's Farming and Countryside programme. And as previously, RPA are the scheme administrators. Ourselves and Natural England provide the technical advice on the schemes and approve the applications for agri-environment and for woodland. Historic England and the Environment Agency do give advice where relevant, for example, in kind of schemes that involve historic features, and also for Environment Agency, water quality and flooding. Next one. So what's been published so far? Hopefully you will have picked up that back in December the 11th, there was quite a lot of information published on Higher Tier. So there was the Get Ready to Apply guidance, is on gov.uk, also details of 132 actions that are going to be available in CS Higher Tier, and 151 capital items, including some new capital items as well, and also the draft terms and conditions. I appreciate if you've looked on gov.uk, you will realise there's an awful lot of information there, and we've tried today to pull out some of the woodland specific content for you. So the previous CS Higher Tier has changed a bit, has evolved through this. So although it's familiar in some ways, it has actually changed in quite a few important features that we'll try to kind of pull out today as well. That's definitely worth you being very aware of. The application will open in this summer, and we've started to invite customers to begin free application activities, and Rhian will say a little bit more about that. But that is a mandatory part of the process. You have to go through pre-application before you can actually apply for higher tier online when it does open in the summer. So yes, the offer's expanded. It's got a lot of amended actions, but also a lot of new actions and new capital items in it. There'll be a rolling application window. So as you may remember, there was fixed application window in the past, once a year. Now it will be rolling. So once it does open in the summer, it will continue to be open. There will also be monthly start dates. So your agreement will go live on the 1st of the month after approval. So instead of one fixed annual start date, they all used to start on the 1st of January. Applications will be made online via raw payment service. So hopefully you'll be relieved to know there's no more horrible Excel spreadsheets to complete. You'll be doing it through an online process. And the payments for actions, instead of being one annual payment, they'll be quarterly in instalments for the revenue actions. Capital items will still be claimed in the same way, so as you've completed the work. So why have we changed the woodland offer? Those of you that may have been around for a while would know before 2015 we had the English Woodland Grant Scheme that had the woodland schemes in it, and then environmental stewardship had the agri-environment schemes. And EWS was very much capital focused scheme, only had one very small revenue option within it. As we went into Countryside Stewardship in 2015, we developed woodland improvement as a revenue option with lots of associated capital items. So that was quite a big change in 2015. And I think we found from feedback over the years that we're not quite managing to achieve our objectives and our outcomes that we want to see. And also we haven't been able to tailor agreements enough to each individual woodland to deliver against the habitats and species that we want to. And because it was a set rate per hectare, £100 per hectare, it often meant that sometimes it was difficult to agree what people would do for that amount of money. So we've learned from that, from the feedback from yourselves and from stakeholders and policy colleagues. And in 2022, we managed to get some improvements into the system by adding 4 supplements covering kind of pause restoration, access, and squirrel and deer control. So we've had taken the opportunity with Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier now to kind of build on that approach, and it was an opportunity to really redesign it. So we've got some base actions we expect everybody to do, but then there's a lot more options and supplements and other actions you can build on top of that to make it appropriate to your woodland, or even the block of woodland, parcel or compartment within that woodland. So the payment rates have also been reviewed and updated. I'm sure you would have noticed that if you looked on gov.uk. And hopefully it's better designed now to work for you, our staff, and to deliver outcomes and government targets. And as Jim will cover, it also now covers new actions for things like agroforestry. So I think I'm passing on to Rhian now. Thank you.
Thanks, Penny. I'm one of the ELM team managers on Penny's team and mainly cover Countryside Stewardship. So I wanted to just cover some of the pre-application process today for CS Higher Tier. So to be able to access the higher tier offer in the summer, you must have pre-application advice. You wouldn't be able to access that offer without. We are now given a 10-day response time to confirm whether pre-application advice is required. Obviously, we're going out to all of our customers in a priority order, which I'll get to after, but because we want to be able to move through some of that list quite quickly, we're given a 10-day response time. As long as somebody comes back to us to say that they're interested in pre-application advice or higher tier, then we would keep them on that list. If not, we would remove from the invitation list, and then if they change their mind in future, then they would have to join the back of the queue. If somebody would like to know where they are on the invitation list, they can contact the RPA helpline or the local area office number, and they will be able to advise where on the list within a sort of 3-month window when contact is likely to be made. We hope to get through that list quicker than we've got at the moment, but it's possible it could be earlier, and it's possible that it could be around the time that you're told. So we're hoping for sooner, but within that 3-month window should be sort of an accurate sort of time frame. So the invitations for pre-application advice are based on customers who have an approved management plan from 2023 onwards, because there's likelihood that they haven't had the chance to apply for higher tier previously. Then customers that are expiring they expired in 2024 because they're higher tier agreements, they haven't had an opportunity to go into anything else. Then we will look to everybody else that has got a valid woodland management plan prior to 2023. There might be amendments needed to some of those plans if some of the actions in line with the new offer are not covered, but that would be in discussions with your woodland officer, and there is a checking guide available to support whether the plan is appropriate for the higher tier. So that's something that can be checked as part of the sort of pre-app process. Moving forward, we plan to streamline the pre-application process with the management plan approval if there is an intention to apply for higher tier at that stage. And then the other thing that is also required if you're looking to go for the species options, a species management plan can be funded under PA7, and that would be needed to be able to access the new species options. And that is available now to apply for funding. Next slide, please. So a bit about the pre-application process. So it will involve checking your woodland management plan as appropriate for the higher tier. If there's any amendments that you think are required to the woodland management plan, they're detailed on the pre-application form, and then the woodland officer will have a discussion with you whether those amendments are appropriate. Indicating the higher tier actions that you wish to apply for at agreement level. So that will just be an indication of what options across the holding that you wish to apply for, not at a parcel level. And then there will be discussions and potentially, if required, a site visit from the woodland officer. That might include suggestions of other actions or items that are appropriate to be included in the higher tier application. And that will help then put together that higher tier application once the system's available in the summer. Mixed applications at pre-application will be dealt with separately. That means that they could be done at completely different times. So Natural England might start their pre-app on the agri side, and we might do our woodland side separately. We have identified where there is crossover to try and sort of make sure we're aware where there is two going on. But once it's streamlined in back at higher tier application, you could put them both back together. If the woodland bit hadn't been done, you could do them separately, or you could do a joint mixed application, dependent on timelines of pre-application advice. But pre-application advice will be separate for woodland and agri to start with. I think that's everything on my slides, and I'm passing over to Rich now.
Hello, everybody. Richard Hoffman, another one of the ELM development managers in Penny's team. I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the sort of the scheme architecture, and then we'll go through some of the highlight points of the options that are there. So this schematic that's on the screen sort of expands on what Penny said about how we've improved the offer. So the woodland management plan is still an eligibility criteria, and we still expect the what you've put in your plan to make sense with the things you apply for. But in terms of the actual structure of the scheme itself, you'll have the base option at the top there in the blue, and on top of that you'll have all the other components. So the line below the base option there in dark green, that those are the 3 supplements that correspond to the types of woodland that you may be managing. So this is your native ancient woodland supplement, this is your pause restoration supplement, and your resilience supplement. You can combine these in an application, but they can't be on top of the same land, so they can be adjacent to one another but not on top. And then coming down to the next line, these are the options that will stack more or less anywhere, eligibility allowing. So this is your historic feature supplement, the management of wildfire, fuel breaks, and belts. Then you've got your flood and drought mitigation supplement and your re-wetting supplement, your watery ones if you like. And then we've also got these new options for the management of 2-zone and 3-zone rides. Then below those in brown, the distinction between the green and the brown is that these brown options can be standalone. They don't necessarily need the base option for these species options, but they will still need approval. So it's not a complete carte blanche as to where they'll go, but they generally are more free. We'll talk a little bit more about the species ones and the access ones later on, but that's why those are there. And then of course there's still capital support, as there has been in the past. Plenty of new items to read about on gov.uk. So next slide, please. So, and there's animations through these, it seems awkwardly. So, oh god. So yeah, the base option. This is. I think there's several clicks. If you just go through until that is awful. So the base option. This is kind of reminiscent of the original WD2 that Penny was talking about. So still requires you to have a management plan. And it's on top of this that all your supplements will be stacked. It has some core management activities associated with it, so the management of deadwood, open space, but also some monitoring requirements. We've added in the ability to have a capitally funded woodland condition assessment as part of that monitoring in years 1 and 9. So in year 1, a baseline will be produced to look at the condition of the woodland as you start the agreement, and then it's either 9 or 10. You will do that baseline, that you'll compare against that baseline again with a second condition assessment. There's now a capital item to support that. We've also reduced the minimum hectarage available for WD2. It used to be 3 hectares. We've reduced it down to 0.5 in line with the definitions that are used to generate the National Forest Inventory. And the other major change to reference here is that previously the agreement length was 5 years. Going forward, it will be 10 years for WD2. Next slide, please. And again, thank you. So this next one, the Managing Native Woodland and Ancient Semi-Natural Woodland Supplement. This is the first of those 3 non-stackable supplements that goes on top of the base option, but it can't be used with any of the other options in the green. This was pulled out from some of the existing prescriptions that used to be sat within WD2. And as with all of these next 3 that we're going to talk about, we realised that the work that was required for this wasn't going to be covered within that £100, and so this is to recognise better the work that we want people to do. So this is a supplement that's mostly targeted around native woodland and for biodiversity. So the main actions that are in there are scrub control, a bit of coppice work, and some thinning and felling, as well as some support from veteran trees, which there's additional capital for that can be seen, but there's also some new optional actions around supporting carefully controlled grazing within woodland. Next slide, please. So this is the second of those supplements. So this is the pause supplement. Again, there used to be pause prescriptions within WD2. We've pulled them out to recognise the work that's required. Similar management requirements in terms of scrub control, some coppice work and some thinning and felling, but there's also additional work required around reduction of coniferous species. So if you remember, the old prescriptions used to say start with 100% of X and reduce it to 80% of X over however many years. Same is there true. There's also some additional optional support here for restocking with native broadleaf species. Next slide, please. This is the third and last of the sort of the independent supplements, if you like. And this is based on the original prescription P2004, which was a silvicultural transformation and continuous cover forestry prescription. And this is aiming to target compartments that are in poor or neglected condition and improve the structure of the canopy over time. And this could be the reasons for doing this could include, wind resistance, drought resistance, as well as for managing for pests and diseases coming in, as we know is becoming increasingly common and threatening. And then we're now going to go through these supplements that stack more or less anywhere. So everything we've talked about until now, you can use these lighter green supplements in combination with. So this first one, managing historic features within woodland, brand new to the woodland offer, and it's come out of the obligations within UKFS to manage historic features, which previously hadn't been paid in CS. And this supplement is designed to help manage regrowth of vegetation on those features and preventing damage. Although the payment rate there says £943 a hectare, it should be recognised that this is only on the footprint of the feature itself. So it's not for the entire area of the parcel or holding. It's just for the feature footprint. And it also should be recognised that for a monument there would be a 20-metre buffer around it, and for other features there would be a 6-metre buffer around it included in that area. And there's, on top of this, there's additional support to carry out some of the more challenging work. So, for example, scrub control with SP1 and SP2. Next slide, please. So another new one here, wildfire supplement. This is quite tightly constrained. It's only for the management of existing fire prevention features at the moment, and it's also quite limited to protected sites. So this is our sort of first foray into what is a ever increasing area of threat. And so at the moment it's paying for the management of wildfire features, so fire and fuel breaks, but also fire belts. As I've said, it's only designated sites that it's available for at the moment, but there's also some capital support for creation that we're looking into for the future. Next slide, please. So this is one of the options for managing for water, flood and drought mitigation. Again, it's new to the woodland offer, and it can be stacked with everything we've talked about so far. And historically, there hasn't been much funding for drought and flood management in CS. There have been and continue to be some capital items on offer, but we recognise the need for people to incorporate water management actions into their revenue payments. And the idea behind this supplement is to kind of support a bit of a cultural change, acknowledge that flood and drought management is here to stay and is a landscape scale issue, and hopefully it will recognise the additional benefits of keeping water on site, and also the importance of wet woodland habitats where they are appropriate. So this final one of the green supplements, this is to do with the management of 2 and 3 zone rides. The basic 1 zone ride for access tracks is covered in the base option, and these 2 and 3 zone ride supplements are there to pay additional money to have more complicated ride structures out there in the landscape. It can be quite a time-consuming process to manage rides well, and that's what we're hoping to achieve. The habitat benefits of having well-structured rides are known, and hopefully that will help us contribute towards our biodiversity targets. And these features, although they're linear, because of the variability of ride widths, depending on which direction they run, etc., these are going to be paid on an area basis, to make sure that people aren't making adverse decisions towards with their ride design in order to be paid fairly for the work they're doing. Next, please. So for the first, the two species options that are there are greyed out. We're going to talk a lot more extensively about species in a minute, so we'll just focus on access. There are several things that are being paid for amongst the access supplement. The first of which is an area-based payment for allowing open access to your woodland, paid at £92 a hectare. This is eligible across all habitat types. So obviously, we're talking about woodland here. There's also funding for woodland welcome signage and orientation boards. That's been there in the previous supplements, and that remains available. In addition, there's also linear features that we've looked at for access, so footpaths, bridleways, and it's not mentioned on the slide, but there's also reduced mobility options, and a lot of these linear features, it's for the ongoing maintenance and allowing people onto these linear features. So it's good to see funding for that. And the kind of the driver behind this helps us meet some of those tree action plan targets to provide safe, appropriate access to public spaces like woodland, and having all lived through COVID, the need for those green spaces is ever more present in people's minds. So that's the access supplement. We're now going to go through the whole suite of species related options. So next slide, please. So similar to the schematic that we went through for the main higher tier offer, this schematic here references the fact that PA7, the species management plan, is a precursor to and a requirement for many of the species options here that are shown in brown. So that is for the control of deer, grey squirrel, edible dormouse, American mink, and invasive plants. There are also two additional supplements that can be stacked anywhere and do not require a species plan. This is for the control of bracken and rhododendron. Next slide, please. So focusing on the species capital item, that's PA7. So to receive funding for writing a species plan, you must use the FC or any approved template that's there on gov.uk for applicants to download. And you would have to use a separate, correct, species-appropriate template for each plan that you're applying for. So, deer plan written on a deer template. It sounds self-explanatory, but just in case. Then they will be sent into relevant species management boxes that are there for people to pick up. And in some instances, NE might be involved in the consultation, so they will be leading on American mink, and in some instances on the invasive plants. However, for deer and squirrel, etc., they will come to us in the first instance, but that's all there in the guidance. Next slide, please. So the first species management plan will go through. So this is what's kind of a light touch overview of what would be expected in those plans. So for the deer, Forestry Commissioner the lead agency, and it will be the deer officers who are approving them. And within the plan, we would expect to see details on the type of habitat in which you're carrying out the management activities for deer species. We would like to see a map, preferably to parcel level, showing where the controls will be carried out. We would want an assessment of deer impact, so what species, the number of species, and what habitats are impacted and to what degree. We would like an explanation of the methods of control that are intended, also the method of ongoing monitoring that will be undertaken, and then the last thing is, in the plan, we'd like to see not only a recognition of expected cull numbers, we'd also like to see a recognition of the amount of effort that is intended to be put in. So, hours of delight in a high seat, for example, just to make sure that we can sign off against the level of work that's being put in to control the problem that's there. Next slide, please. So For grey squirrel, fairly similar in terms of requirements. So again, Forestry Commission would be the lead agency. However, rather than the deer officers, it will be our woodland officers that are approving these plans. Similarly, we would want details of which habitats will be are involved in the management. We would again need a map showing where the management and also the monitoring activities are being carried out. We would want a assessment of how much impact there is in the areas you're controlling, and then we'd want recognition of the methods you intend to carry out, and also the how you will produce that ongoing monitoring report. And again, similar to the deer, it doesn't say it here, but not only do we want expected cull numbers, we'd also want recognition in the plan of the amount of effort that's intended to be put in. Next slide, please. So here the delightfully cute but sometimes pesky edible dormouse, Gliss. Again, we're leading on this, so Forestry Commission, and it will be our woodland officers who sign this off. Very similar requirements, so details on the habitats that you're going to be managing the edible dormouse within, a map showing where the monitoring and management will be carried out. Again, assessment of impact, how they're going to be controlled, how you're going to monitor the effect of that control, and then cull numbers and effort. Very similar requirements there. Next slide, please. This next one, invasive non-native species. So generally, Natural England are leading on this. However, woodland invasive plants will be led by Forestry Commission. So for woodland plants, what's needed? So the type of habitats where invasive non-native species will be managed will be required in the plan. Then a map showing where the controls will be carried out again. Assessment of impact. So what species have been found, what's the extent of the spread, and what is the impact of the presence of that plant. Photographs and parcel references for those invasive non-native species would be expected, just so that they're there as a record. And then again, method of control, method of monitoring being recorded as well in that plan. Next slide, please. I'm now going to be passing on to Jim.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before I start, can I just remind everyone that if they have any questions, rather than putting hands up, could you type in the Q&A box, please, and also use the voting buttons because that will raise the more popular questions to the top of the field. So if you fire from there. So yeah, I'm Jim O'Neill. I'm the Agroforestry Development Manager for the Forestry Commission, and just going to talk to you a little bit today about how we are dealing with agroforestry in the sort of pre-application phase. I'll explain how that goes as we go through. Just want to remind you of what we are talking about with the agroforestry offer under ELM. If you look at the picture on the screen at the moment, there are lots of different types of agroforestry, what I term the spectrum of agroforestry. Lots of it is available via other parts of government grants through UCO, through CS, etc., in one form or another, and it just demonstrates that we've all been carrying out a lot of agroforestry for many years, just not calling it that. But the current offer that's available in CS is the in-field agroforestry offer. That's the bit that was missing, perhaps, that we didn't have before. And that's where we can plant trees in a number of arrangements within the boundaries of a field. And yeah, it's available as SFI and in CS Higher Tier. So next slide, please. So just want to remind you a couple of things. It's important to understand if your land has sensitivities, as you all know as woodland practitioners and woodland creation agents. It's carefully regulated, tree planting in England, and we need to make sure that we're not planting trees in the wrong place. So with that in mind, the SFI locations, the question we often get answered is why is SFI only available in certain parts of the country? SFI is based on the low sensitivity to woodland creation maps with some adjustments. So we've pre-assessed SFI locations to only offer the SFI at in the very, very lowest sensitivity areas, because the SFI has not got any sort of administration oversight. So basically, you can apply for the agroforestry grant, get an agreement from the RPA, and go ahead and plant. With that comes quite prescriptive designs, and I'll explain a bit more about that later, to use with that land. And okay, once we get outside the SFI layer, land may or may not have sensitivities that need careful consideration. Next, please. So, if you're outside, if you are wanting to plant agroforestry outside the SFI layer, you will need to apply through CS Higher Tier. The process guides people through a series of headings to make sure if tree planting in those locations is suitable, or if it needs any mitigation before planting. And whilst CS Higher Tier agroforestry is available across all the land, it's still subject to individual site applications. So basically the difference is SFI is only available in the SFI layer, and CS Higher Tier is available everywhere, subject again to individual site designs and locations and that sort of thing. I mentioned there, you might want to be to do more creative or adventurous agroforestry designs, and I'll explain what that looks like in a moment. But an important point to remember with CS Higher Tier, you get the opportunity to have advisor input through the Forestry Commission and Natural England, who are going to jointly deliver agroforestry. Next, please. So what does SFI look like? I've just ringed a couple of bits to make sure you focus on them. So SFI on a sort of grid or random spacing, there is a requirement that trees can be no closer together than 15 meters, and they are in grid patterns or random if you can if there's space to be able to randomly space them, but they can't be any closer than 15. Next, please. And the big difference when you get to CS Higher Tier is there is a lot more flexibility in what the applicant can do. They all read the same, except the levels of stocking density are different. So you can plant trees in your field anything between 5 meters and 45 meters apart. So that gives you the opportunity to manipulate the canopy in the way you feel you need for your land. And that's why you may or may not run into forestry EIA or agricultural EIA issues, but that's why there's some oversight in the CS Higher Tier, because you could be creating woodland, you might not. Depends on your density and spacing, but there is an opportunity there to do something like that, and the agroforestry woodland officer and Natural England advisor, they're available on hand to talk you through things. Thank you. Next, please. So the PA4 agroforestry plan is available. It's a standalone capital item. It is available now, even though some capital items are closed, and it can be applied for at any time. It's £1,268.08 per plan, and it can be used for an applicant to dip their toe in the water and see if agroforestry might work for them. And if the answer is they're not interested at the end of it, that's a perfectly viable result. So it's something that can be used to explore, and if they choose it is something for them, it can really be used to hone down the thinking to see if agroforestry fits with their land, their business, and also their environmental considerations. Next, please. So the plan is definitely designed to lead applicants through the whole process, but particularly any environmental considerations they may need to consider, and regulatory requirements like EIA, forestry EIA, and agricultural EIA may or may not be needed, but the plan will lead you through that process. And also, if you need to engage with stakeholders, the plan gives you a nice platform to present the information in a way that would be useful for applicants to understand, stakeholders to understand. But the most important point is that you need a PA4 agroforestry plan completed and approved and agreed before you can go on to apply for CS Higher Tier capital and revenue grants. So that's the main takeaway point from today. Next, please. And we're on a pre-application call, and there is no real pre-application in agroforestry. However, the PA4 plan gives us a really useful sort of pipeline sort of measure of what's coming down the tracks, if you like. I'm mixing metaphors now. But basically, we can see the level of interest in PA4s. We'll know how many PA4s are on the go once they've been applied for. And we can see the flow of the potential future capital and revenue applications that might be coming. So because of different sensitivities and different complexities, the PA4 approval times will be quite varied. It will really be dependent on where you are and what your level of ambition is. But the pre-app angle of agroforestry is really going to be based upon the approval date of each PA4 plan. So once you have your approval date, that will put you in any sort of level of order, if you like, as regards to CS Higher Tier revenue and capital applications. So we'll have a really good handle on what's coming, how things are being processed, and we can adapt to any necessary action that we might need to take. But I think we'll have sufficient information to make sure that we're able to accommodate your applications when they land. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Right, hello, it's back to me. So I just got a couple of slides just for information, then we'll move on to the questions that you've been putting into the chat. We've got information just on this slide about, and just to remind you that we do send out very regular e-alerts, and we'll keep on putting updates around CS Higher Tier into those e-alerts as well. So please do subscribe to that if you haven't already. And then also our area teams also have newsletters, and they'll be running kind of local events as well to talk about CS Higher Tier in the coming weeks and months. So please do make sure you've signed up for those, so you'll have information about those local events to where you are. Also, DEFRA have a farming blog as well, so please do subscribe to that, because that's where a lot of the latest updates also come out about the farming and countryside programme. And also because recognising there's an awful lot of information when you go onto the gov.uk pages, we've done some blogs just to try and summarise some of the messages around higher tier agroforestry and woodland management, and we're also planning to do one on species in the coming weeks as well. So that's just slightly more digestible information, because there's an awful lot of it on gov.uk. Next one. And so contact details. So if you do have specific questions, especially, please do contact the RPA about specific cases you already have, and also the Forest Commission teams through our operational delivery teams and our area offices, and the contact details for those folk. If you go through those links, they are on gov.uk as well, so they'll get you to the right person to talk to in your area team, although I'm sure a lot of you already know who your local woodland officer is. So I think that's over to the Q&A now. So I think, Lucy, are you reading out the questions and then bringing in people as needed to answer them?
Yeah. So we've got quite a few questions, so I will jump straight in and we'll come to the most upvoted ones first and hope we get through as many as possible. So the first question is, under higher tier woodland previously, woodland had to be high priority for woodland improvement WD2. Is this going to be the same going forward? What are going to be the prerequisites other than having an approved woodland management plan to apply for woodland funding?
Okay, I'll have a stab at this, but if anybody else wants to come in and say something else when I've said this. So those of you that have applied for CS before will know that we had scoring in the previous scheme and targeting layers, and you had to hit kind of various different priorities and objectives to get in, whether it was high priority habitat or species, triple SI, ancient woodland, etc. So there is no scoring in the scheme as such. But to be able to access, especially the supplements, we expect everybody to be able to access CWD2, so the base option, or the base set of actions. To actually then access the other supplements, you obviously have to have relevant woodland. So to get the pools, you need to have pools. To get the native and ancient woodland supplement, you have to have that kind of type of habitat. So so that's really the kind of eligibility criteria will be, have you got those features? But also your approved woodland management plan will have identified the things that you want to do. And so that's what's really key to this. So yes, it is mandatory to have an FC approved woodland management plan to come in. That is a really key document that will be kind of leading you to, well, how you're going to tailor your agreement for your woodland. And as we've said, that the supplements and things to add on to that base option can vary between different compartments and parcels within your woodland as well. So it can be tailored to do that. So, but there's no scoring for this round of Countryside Stewardship. So I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything else to that. Okay.
No, we'll jump to the next one. So the current shortage of woodland officers might well result in bottlenecks. What is being done to resolve this issue?
Okay.
That was you again, Penny.
Yeah, no, I can just talk from my perspective on this. But so in 2023, we delivered 525 higher tier woodland agreements, and the resources we've got in area teams is similar to that, and we are planning to do a similar number, hopefully slightly more. But obviously I do recognise that can be differences across the country, and obviously as folk leave, we have to recruit replacements. So I understand there is differences across the country, but the resource levels should be adequate to deliver the schemes, because we've got that commitment to that resourcing level to do the higher tier schemes. But I probably can't go further than that. I'm not in control of the budgets, so, and those area teams, but I think that's my understanding.
Okay, and we've got one next on new supplements. So the information on gov.co.uk provide an overview. Are there going to be any further details about eligibility, outcomes and mandatory actions to be included in an agreement? When will these be provided?
So all right, okay.
Lucy.
Thank you.
So the information out there at the moment is to support pre-application. So there is information on the minimum action required in order to receive payment for those CS high tier actions. We're anticipating some supporting voluntary guidance to be published either this month or early next month. And then prior to scheme opening, we'll expect more information ahead of the summer opening as well.
Okay, thanks, Becky. And next we have, do you have to apply for the Species Plan Grant PA7 to get an approved plan, or can we just submit the completed template to the FC?
I'm happy to take this one. So no, the answer is you can use the official template and submit it unfunded, and provided it's approved, you'll then be completely the species options will be then open to you. So it's up to you whether you take the funding, but you do have to use the template, and it does have to be an approved plan before you can access the species options.
Okay, thanks, Rich. And next, when can people without existing agreements apply for CS Higher Tier? Do you have a rough ballpark for when this will be?
Brian, do you want to cover this?
Yep. So I'm not quite clear on what it means by the existing agreements, because obviously anyone that's applying for higher tier will need that woodland management plan. So anybody with a woodland management plan will eventually be in our list of people to invite in. So if you're applying for a new woodland management plan, you would get included into that list. So anybody with existing higher tier probably won't be on that list because they're already in an agreement. It's only expiries that we're looking at when they come to an end. So I think in terms of woodland management plan, if you're applying for a plan now, once it's approved, we'll put you on that list. And if you've already got a plan, eventually we will get further down that list. And I think there is some more information to be published by DEFRA in February, which might give some more details. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks, Rhiannon. And the next one is about resilience. So can the resilience supplement be used in conifer woodland compartments?
Do you want me to cover this one, Rich? I think the resilience supplement's there very much to support continuous cover forestry and the conversion to that silvicultural system. So yes, if your woodland management plan is planning to do that, is to convert your so it doesn't matter whether it's conifer woodland or not, it's whether it's going to convert to continuous cover forestry. So there's no specific inclusion or exclusion depending on the species. So I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that, but that's my understanding, Ben.
Okay, thank you. And next one, so this is about with monitoring records, annual in particular, is there going to be better connections between FC and RPA to save dual submission of reports and emails requesting info months after you've already submitted them to the FC?
Rhiannon, do you want to take this? I'm guessing this is probably a species record one, I imagine.
I think it is changing moving forward. We're going to look at the processes in line with that for the plans and make sure that any evidence that's being submitted is a little bit more streamlined and is easier to do. And I think some of the problems have been coming from the first sort of batch that we've worked with the RPA to do, and hopefully we should see some of those teething issues start to stop moving forward. But we are in regular conversations to try and make sure that process is smoothed. But if there are any problems, we are happy to try and sort of resolve those moving forward. But the new species plans and the monitoring records, I think we are looking for a better process moving forward. So hopefully people will find that an improved way. Thank you.
Okay. And the next one is, will there be scope to alter the management options at all, as a 10-year management commitment is a long time?
I'll say kind of what I'm feeling about this. I think we've moved to 10 years from 5 years because a lot of the feedback we had was that a lot of the woodland management actions need longer than 5 years to actually produce the outcomes we're after. But we do understand that is a long time and things can happen in a woodland. We're still requiring kind of monitoring reports during the life of the agreement. And I'm anticipating when we get to year 5 and we've got that monitoring report from halfway through the agreement, we'll see if we need to make any changes to the agreement. But we are expecting more information to come out about CS Higher Tier in general on amendments and how people make changes. And it could well be through the annual declaration process that they'll have, as they do have for SFI, that people will be able to make changes. But I think we'd encourage people to probably give it to that year 5 before making major changes or major amendments to your scheme.
Okay, thanks, Penny. And the next one is about PA4. So how does one actually apply for the PA4 at the moment? There doesn't appear to be an option within the RPA portal.
Thanks, Lucy.
Are you okay, Jim, or do you want me to?
Well, I'm not sure about the RPA portal, but certainly we're getting a flow of PA4 plans through. So there should be a way of getting to that via gov.uk. but I can't say I've looked at the RPA portal. If you can enlighten me, that'd be great. Thanks, Rhiannon.
So you can't apply online for PA4, so you won't be able to apply through the portal, but there should be a way to request the application form on gov.uk when looking at the PA4.
Okay, thanks both. And the next one is about agroforestry as well, Jim. So how competitive will CS Higher Tier agroforestry schemes be?
By competitive, do you mean competitive against other types of grants or against each other? They will be based upon the approval date of the PA4 agroforestry plan. So if that will put them in a form of order, if you like, of how they'll be dealt with. But we'll have to just remain see how the uptake goes, really.
Okay, did anyone else have anything to add there? No, and I think I might have just missed a supplementary question about which was following the PA4 one. Hang on 2 seconds. Let me just find it. Right, got it. So that was so when we were asking about how we actually apply for the PA4, the same question goes for standalone capital woodland items, which we have been told are still open, but there doesn't seem to be any route to apply.
The higher tier capital is the same, so you can apply by the form on gov.uk. It's not a portal-based application, but higher tier capital is still open to apply for.
Thanks, Rhiannon. And then we've got who receives the invite? Will it go to the agent or the landowner? So this must be the pre-application invite.
So that will go to whoever is registered on rural payments. So whoever's registered as the main contact on rural payments will receive that invite.
Lovely, thanks, Rhiannon. So that was a straightforward answer. So the next one, with the rides, how is anyone expected to map the rides, including width? An average width is achievable, but we don't want to be felling 100-year-old oaks just for the ride. Will there be tolerance in the area?
The answer is if I'm honest, I don't know the level of tolerance that would be there. I would imagine though, because you're applying for an area, if you're uncomfortable, don't as with all these things, don't push it. We certainly don't want you to be in that situation where you are having to do adverse things. But maybe that's one for us to take away and just and flesh out in the guidance. It's a good question. Unless anybody else knows more than I.
Yeah, no, we can try and pick that up in the guidance, but I think you're right. And, we're expecting people to identify these rides in their management plans as well. So they need to identify the right level of area, don't they, to put in for their 2 and 3 zone.
Okay. And the next question is, when will you be releasing what the management requirements are with the new supplements, e.g. CWS8?
I think that's similar to the question I answered earlier about we are following the publication to support pre-application published in December. We're expecting the voluntary guidance to come out either this month or next, and then closer to scheme opening in the summer, there should be further information available on gov.uk.
Okay, thanks, Becky. And the next one is about squirrel and deer control. So how important is squirrel and deer control in establishment of woodland? David, you were going to take this one.
Yeah, I'll take this one. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely crucial, isn't it? I mean, we know that deer populations and squirrel populations, for that matter, are very high across most areas of the country, and that everything we're trying to achieve in our woodlands is going to be adversely affected by their populations. So, yeah, we hold them in very high regard, and we need to sort the problem out with the species management plans that stem from the woodland management plans. The risks from deer and squirrels need to be highlighted in the woodland management plan to make them eligible for the species control plans, and we'll all be working to support getting them managed better across whole landscapes. There was a supplementary question about landscape species control plans I picked up a little while ago, and the species control plan will have to be on the holding area But where you're working with cluster groups or working together with other landowners, I'd suggest having a sort of a control statement for that area that would then fit into that species control plan as well.
David?
Rebecca, you don't want to add anything for squirrels?
I'll just add in the question was specifically around the establishment, and the sort of general consideration is that squirrels become an issue once a tree is strong enough to hold a squirrel. So for newly planted woodland, in those first couple of years of establishment, squirrels are generally less of a factor. But I would encourage people to start monitoring for evidence of impacts from year 5 onwards. And whatever you've got in your management plan, you will have risk assessed the likely impacts of deer and squirrel in there. So you should be aware from that woodland management plan of how significant that risk is to your objectives.
Okay, thanks both. We have a question here about, will we be able to pause and save applications online and download the information before submitting? Becky, were you going to pick that one up?
Come in, Lucy. I don't think we know at the moment exactly where you can pause and save because it's currently in development, but it's likely to be per screen, but obviously we'll check that as we go through, and unfortunately we just can't answer at the moment.
No, I mean, they're still building the application system at the moment, but obviously we'll be feeding back what we're hearing from people and what we think we need for the functionality for us to do what we've got to do, as well as for you guys to be able to apply as well. So we'll make sure we raise those things, but we are expecting to have user testing to happen on the new system as well.
Okay, thank you. So the next one is, will the monitoring templates be updated as the previous Excel is unusable?
So I think this is to do with the species monitoring, and there was an issue with the squirrel monitoring templates in particular, but that has now been fixed and the new documents have been uploaded along with updated guidance. That's under the WS3 existing agreement holders. So go back and check gov.uk, the new documents are there and they should all work.
Okay, lovely, thank you. We've got one here about the PA7 plan. So £204.79 per type of species per approved plan to a maximum of 1,023.95 per approved plan. Just to clarify, this would have to cover a deer plan, squirrel plan, and, for example, a balsam plan. Rich, were you going to pick that one up?
So the payment there, that £204.79 is per plan. So each plan you apply for, each type of plan you'd apply for, you'd get that payment. So if you were applying for, or if you did have to apply for all of the things, and that does multiply out to 1,023, then that is the correct maths. I see the follow-up comment there from Luke about it, recognizing that it's a lot of work, potentially including site services. We can recognize that, I suppose, but it gives access to that area-based revenue payment over the 10 years. But if there are concerns about the payment rate, of course we need to know about it. But yes, that is the current payment. Unless anybody else wants to add anything, Penny, or no, fine. Thanks for the question.
Okay, thank you. And the next one is, how many years remaining with an approved woodland management plan can an applicant apply? E.g., if you are 8 years through a 10-year woodland management plan, can you still apply for higher tier? Brianne, is that one for you?
You can still apply for the higher tier, but obviously you would need to renew that plan to cover the period of the higher tier agreement once you're at that point. So although you can still apply, you would still need to make sure that that was continuous throughout the lifetime of the agreement.
Okay, thanks, Brianne. So the next one, does coppice meet woodland resilience requirements? It's not continuous cover forestry by the formal definition, though it is similar.
I suppose I can take this one. I suppose the particulars of it will matter as to what was agreed in the management plan. So I guess it's going to be it will be agreed by a woodland officer, though, and they would have been able to advise you through that as to what would be appropriate when it comes to actually working out the application as well. It's going to be case by case, unless anybody else wants to contradict me.
Yeah, it might be, you know, that coppice is more appropriate for the native and ancient woodland supplement because that includes coppicing within it. But also we've got a new capital item to help support restoration of coppice as well. So that would be worth looking at.
Okay, thanks both. And the next one is not sure whether this is a specific question, but we could talk about this. So our woodland management plan is still in progress and due to be signed off soon. Hopefully it's been in process for a year. When would we be able to apply? Rhiannon?
So once the management plan is approved, we would put you on the invitation list to be able to do pre-app. Obviously, at the moment, it depends which area you're based in, depends on what the time frame for that would be. It is possible that there might be quite a long wait for that pre-app. And then once you've had that pre-application advice, you'd be able to apply for the higher tier once available. But once that plan is fully approved and signed off, we might be able to give that time frame out once that's happened.
Okay, thanks, Rhiannon. We've got a question about will these slides be available?
We are going to be circulating the recording of this webinar in an email early next week.
Lovely, thanks, Becky. And the next one here is, we have never had a woodland management plan before and have one almost ready to submit. Will we automatically be invited to apply for CS Higher Tier, or do we need to do something else to get on the list?
We're automatically including anyone that's plans are approved once they've been approved onto the invite list. So there's nothing else you need to do at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Rhiannon. And the next one here is, where do CS woodland agreements expiring December 2025 fit in the invitation list?
So once we get a bit closer, we will consider putting those into the list because obviously we expect, like 2024 expiries, that there might be some that need to fit into the queue. So we will look at those expiries closer to the time, but we haven't included them in the current list.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry to interject. Is there a slight caveat there as to if you've already started applying for a new plan, you might be on the list at that point?
Yeah, I think that's right, Rich. Yeah.
Okay, thanks both. So I've got one here saying, removing all laurel from one woodland estate I have in mind will take more than 3 years. Will FC accept a phased programme?
I'm presuming that's referring to the capital to remove the roadie because they're 3-year agreements. I'm assuming that's what it means. And we are expecting people to be able to reapply again for capital during the lifetime of the scheme. So hopefully that answers that.
Thanks, Penny. And the next one here, with access and engagement supplement, is this available to landowners such as National Trust, Woodland Trust and National Parks?
As far as I know, the eligibility for access is no different from higher tier in general. So there's information if you go on to that prepare for higher tier around who can get in. But as far as national park authorities are probably slightly different from Woodland Trust and National Trust. So Woodland Trust and National Trust already apply for a lot of CS higher tier, so I don't see that being any different. National park authorities, they probably are public bodies, and public bodies are able to apply for CS higher tier as long as it's not for something that's part of their statutory duties and they aren't already funded to do it. So I'm hoping that helps. But there is a section on the eligibility of public bodies that's in there. I think I did look it up, 6.3. So if you have a bit of a look in there, it will have that sort of detail in it. As far as I know, unless anybody knows anything different, I don't think there's anything specific as far for the access actions.
Okay, Thanks, Penny. So will the 10-year duration be compulsory, or can you choose 5 or 10-year?
They're 10-year agreements now.
Okay, thank you. And the next one is, as the CS Higher Tier agroforestry options are new, how long do you envisage people will have to wait to apply, as they won't have a pre-existing agreement, so won't be invited?
Jim, do you want me to just come in and then you come off the back if there's something you want to add?
Yep, thanks, Brian.
So the agroforestry plans, as the plans come in, obviously we'll be checking whether there's a likelihood of wanting to apply for higher tier, and then they will be creating their own queue for agroforestry higher tier. So they don't need a pre-existing agreement. We will look at the agroforestry plans in order and invite those people to apply for the agroforestry items in higher tier. There might be a slight disconnect with other sort of agri agreements or woodland agreements if you were applying for different options, actions and items even.
I think that's fine. Yeah, as I say, you know, it's a queue of approved PA4 dates. That's the order we'll be tackling applications for capital and revenue. So yeah, thanks, Rhiannon.
Okay, thanks both. The next one is, the rates all look good, but how big is the overall budget for the scheme? How will you prioritise schemes?
It's a bit of a question for DEFRA rather than us, to be honest, is the overall budget. But there isn't a specific budget that's just for woodland, for example. It's just for higher tier. And I don't think we've got anybody from DEFRA on the call, so I'm not sure if there is a specific budget. But we've been involved in forecasting the numbers we think are likely to come in and what we think we can process this year, and we've forecasted the take up going forward as well. So from that, they'll be working out what the demand is likely to be. And we've been estimating what the values, average values of schemes will be. So we've input into that information. So at the moment, like I said earlier, there's no specific scoring in the scheme. And so we're just going through the invite in kind of order at the moment. So that's probably all I can say really on the budget side of things.
Okay, thanks, Penny. And the next one is about pause restoration. So pause restoration will have a cumulative impact on conifer timber availability over time. Are FC, DEFRA considering a supplement or link to UCO to create new replacement timber bearing woodlands, as well as restoring the pause sites?
I can say a few things and then perhaps others will want to contribute. So I don't think at the moment we're looking into any options that are specifically targeted at creating new productive woodland. However, there is a whole load of work going on on the back of some of the timber strategy work that's going on in DEFRA at the moment, which we will inevitably feed into over time. But I think the answer at the moment is no, the grants aren't targeting productivity. Unless anybody wants to come in and contradict me.
No, I think it's a very live discussion with policy colleagues at the moment, but there isn't anything specific in this particular iteration of CS.
Thank you. And here's a specific agroforestry one. So can we use the agroforestry options for cricket bat willow plantations?
Yes, in theory, they would be subject to site-specific issues and also for CS Higher Tier PA4 plan work through. But yes, in theory, if they're on the list of UCO and they're planted as per some of the designs in the agroforestry offer, then yes, potentially.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. Nice. So the next one is, if the time actually spent on deer GSQ control is less than set out in the plan, yet the cull figures in line, will that be acceptable?
Do we jump in on that one?
Thank you.
It will all depend upon the habitat and the objectives for prevention and reduction of impact. So it's impact driven, not numbers driven. So the expectation based on survey work over a lot of years is that we need one well, 1 3-hour block of time per hectare of woodland across eligible areas of deer stalking time to actually reduce impact levels. So I'd be basing it on impacts that are currently occurring, as opposed to be driven by cull numbers. And we are paying for, at the end of the day, we are paying for extra time on the ground to do that control.
Okay, thanks, David. There's one about mapping. So is all the mapping going to be through the online portal too?
The mapping won't be on the online portal at the moment, as far as we're aware. I think there will be a detail of the maps, like you would see on rural payments, but it is being developed at the moment. But we expect that there probably still will be paper maps, but it is still sort of a developing situation at the moment. But we're not likely to see all mapping through the portal.
Okay, thanks, Rhiannon. And the next one is, can threatened species payments be applied to woodlands? Is a species management plan needed to apply for it?
So the threatened species supplement is separate to the options to control. So the threatened species is for things like willow tit, and is to do with the creation of appropriate habitat. So they are separate, and it would be covered by your management plan rather than a species management plan.
Okay.
Can I add something? They're also very bespoke. The payment rate's very bespoke. So you need to create a plan, probably with Natural England, unless it is a willow tit, for your site. So it's very much a case of planning it out.
Thanks, Sam. This one about budget we've already covered. So the next one is, how valid will a woodland condition assessment be if conducted before CS Higher Tier application? Chris Tomlin mentioned up to 2 years before start.
Yes, I think that's the current thinking. So if you've already completed a condition assessment within the last 2 years, you could use that for your within 2 years of the requirement in year 1, you could use that as your baseline. We're going to be and we're going to keep reviewing that going forward as to exactly where the red lines are for use of condition assessments. But yes, currently you could use that in your first year.
Okay, thanks, Rich. The next one is, the 10-day response deadline for a pre-app is tight. Is there any way this can be extended?
So we've put this in just to make sure that we get a response. If I've just noticed in the comments, it mentions about being on a 2-week holiday. If it's because you've been away on a 2-week holiday, then do contact us and come back to us to say that you want to look at it. It's not to say that you've got to do everything within those 10 days. We just need a notification to say, yes, I'm interested in the pre-app and I'll be coming back to you. And then we'll send chaser letters after that. But the first 10 days that we would like a response, just to make sure that we know whether to continue trying to contact you or not about the pre-application. Thank you.
Thanks, Rhiannon. And this is about will ride locations and areas need agreeing in the woodland management plan, or the aim to develop rides and then location. Oh, sorry, somebody's popped up on my screen. And then location and area agreed in the CS Higher Tier application.
It'll be the second of those. So the woodland management plan will need to record that there is the objective to extend the ride network, but the details of where they are would need to be fleshed out in the CS Higher Tier application. So that's where you need to say where they are and what habitat, free zone or 2-zone ride you'd be creating.
Thanks, Sam. And the next one, does a recently approved, i.e. last 2 months, detailed woodland management plan count as pre-application advice?
So that wouldn't count as pre-application advice. The pre-application form would still need to be completed, and that form is sent out once we invite to be able to complete pre-application. So it might mean that your management plan is up to date and ready to go, but we would still need the pre-application form.
Okay, thanks, Rhiannon. And the next one, do you have set species for certain types of woodland, for example, wet woodland or riparian strips?
I think the answer to that is no. I'm not quite, to be honest, I'm not quite sure what the, do you mean, I wonder if that is referring to tree species or if it's referring to species in need of control. Sam, so you've come on to camera.
Yeah, the floods and drought supplement doesn't have to be in a native woodland. It's more about managing the features that you would create using the capital items to control the water on the site. And then the floods and drought supplement pays you a maintenance of those capital items. So you don't need to have a native riparian or wet woodland habitat for the floods and drought supplement. If you wanted to do the re-wetting supplement, then there would be a greater desire to be delivering wet woodland habitat.
Okay. So the next one is, what is the reason behind the limited number of applications that can be submitted this year? Rhiannon, is that one you want to pick up?
So the reason behind the application numbers is based on what we can manage with our current resource. Obviously, we're trying to do as many as we can, and we don't want people to be waiting for long periods of time, and that's why we're managing sort of the flow through pre-application into the higher tier application as well. So it's purely, we expect there to be quite a lot of people wanting to apply, and we don't want everybody to be sat waiting while we're getting to those applications. But obviously we can only handle a certain amount of applications based on our resourcing.
Yeah, and I suppose it's fair to say this is a new system and a new way of delivering it through pre-application and then into the online system. So it's, as that new system is being built, we want to obviously start putting applications into that to make sure it does work as well. But we are planning to deliver a similar amount of higher tiers as we did last time we were open. So we're aiming for, I think, 575 during the first during this first year. So we should still do slightly more than we did in 2023. It's just that we know there's obviously quite a big demand out there, and we've got to manage that into the system, and especially because it's a new process.
Okay, thanks both. So the next one is, the amount of work for the pre-application and different plans is immense. To make this more manageable, can estates break woodlands into work groups rather than all woodlands? Or with the WD2 option, if that is on all, can then at different times other options be layered so that work can be focused?
So I think somebody could split it if they were doing like a range of parcels and all of the actions and items on those parcels. I'm not sure how it would work if you put WD2 on everything and you were trying to add things in afterwards. I'm not sure of the system capability to be doing that in future. There is the higher tier capital. Obviously, you could apply for different capital items, but I suggest if you wanted to split it to do a section, that you could do that whole area and everything you wanted to do on there, and then another section. So there's no harm in having multiple applications, but where you want to put the same option, different options on the same parcel, I don't think you can do that across agreements.
It's probably worth saying a lot of states tend to divide their woodland up across different landscape kind of areas and do management plans relating to those different sets of woodland that might be in a specific area. So we do have many estates that tend to have like several different management plan areas that they can bring in at different times, so they don't need to do it all at the same time. But obviously it's up to how each estate wants to manage their land holding, and for us to agree that that's the right approach to take as far as approving the woodland management plan.
Okay, thanks both. I think we've just got 4 minutes left, so we might want to wrap up with a couple of final questions here. The first one here is, will FC offer a super user or agents workshop to support efficient applications?
I'm thinking this might be when it actually gets to online applications. This might be a reference rather than to pre-app, but we're hoping that we'll work with RPA colleagues to be able to do some user testing, and we're not quite sure what the rollout of training will be for both our staff and for external users at the moment. So if that's what that's in reference to, that would make sense to be able to support the sector in doing that once the online application is open. So we can feed that into the product team and the RPA that are developing the system, if it's about the actual online application.
Okay. And this next one is a bit of feedback rather than a specific question. I think it's very difficult for landowners to know whether to enter this scheme when there's still so much detail missing, particularly management requirements. The payment rates look great, but if they require millions of records to be submitted each year, then they may be worse off. Also, are the payment rates going to increase with inflation over 10 years? I'm not sure. This is one we can answer.
I mean, I think on the payment rate question, there is a commitment from DEFRA to regularly review payment rates going forward, and so I think their plan is to review a set, a number each year on a rolling programme. But I don't know any further details than that, because that would be something that DEFRA would do as far as payment rates go. So I think on that one, I think their information on gov.uk at the moment does kind of list what we call prescriptions in the past. Those actions are listed under the information that is there. But I think, as Becky said, there is more voluntary guidance coming out as well. But it does talk in there about what the requirements are for monitoring reports as well under the base option. That already talks about that information there. But I do know there's an awful lot of information there to sort through as well.
Thanks, Penny. I think we're just about out of time, but we will gather all the questions that have been asked, and we'll share, rather than a sort of specific Q&A document. I think our plan is to share either through blogs or through our customer e-alert, just the general themes that have been pulled out. So the last one is, if a property is sold midway through an agreement, will there be the ability to transfer to a new owner to carry on, or will it terminate and the process have to start again?
I don't know the complete answer to that, and it's something that might need to be checked with the RPA, because there are rules around transfers, and I don't know whether it currently terminates and the process starts again. But I think there are some rules around transfers, but the RPA might be able to help with the process and what will happen moving forward.
I think there is something in that draft T's and C's on gov.uk, but I must admit it's not a kind of our area of expertise. That's really a DEFRA and RPA question, but I'm pretty sure there's information on there about succession and transfers.
Okay, we're just about out of time.
Well, I'd just like to say thank you, everybody, for dialing in and for all your questions. And I think, as Lucy said, we'll be sending out the link to this recording. I've picked up an email saying that somebody was struggling to see the slides and to be able to input to the Q&A. So hopefully, when you've seen the information and listened to the recording, that will help when that goes out to you as well. So apologies for that. I think there was some instructions from Eventbrite about how to open on desktop and things like that to get the best out of it. But so apologies if you have dialed in and not being able to see everything and not being able to participate. We will look into that. But thank you all very much.